Welcome to Flash Frights. You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast. Flash Frights, welcome back to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me, as always, fellow co-host Pete Sharpnell. All right, Pete, the year is 1981. Things get a little hairy at the box office. We've got An American Werewolf in London. You also have The Howling. You might also have Wolfen playing at another screen at the same multiplex because 1981, the year of the werewolf.
People were wolfing down a lot of werewolf movies in 1981, you could say. Or I could say. I did say.
You did say. Absolutely.
Wolfen. They can sense the rhythm of your blood. Hear clouds pass overhead. See where you are blind. A force so deadly it will tear the scream from your throat. Wherever you are, they are. Wolfen, rated R.
So let's make the statement right now, the bold statement from the Fan2Fan Podcast, an official statement, Pete. If you co-sign on this.
Official statement incoming from the Fan2Fan Podcast.
Wolfen is the redheaded stepchild, the underrated of the werewolf trifecta.
I mean, it's certainly the least remembered of the three. I don't know if the reasons are obvious or not, but with American Werewolf in London and The Howling, you had two tour de force makeup jobs by two of the best in the business, one winning an Academy Award to top that off. So we're talking, of course, about Rick Baker and Rob Bottin, respectively, on those. So Wolfen was one of those that, yeah, it really, even for 1981, it kind of slipped through the cracks. It's not, I call it a werewolf adjacent movie, just because it kind of gets lumped into it, but it's not really about werewolves, although there's like certainly horror elements to it. It's an odd movie. I remember seeing this when I was young. I don't know if it was a cable staple, but the first time I remember seeing it was stumbling upon it one night, flipping through the old illegal cable box that my dad, who was an electrician, had procured for our family. And it was either Showtime or HBO. Came across this movie with like these weird low angle camera shots and then shot in this kind of bizarre effect that, you know, now looking back on it, you would call like Predator-esque, I guess might be for people that are unfamiliar with Wolfen. And I was really intrigued, kind of creeped me out a bit, and I was hooked. I came in probably shortly after the movie had started, and it kind of like lodged itself in the back of my brain. And so I recently revisited it because I hadn't watched it in many, many years. And I was curious if it held up. And I would say for the most part, it does. It's a really interesting horror/police procedural.
Is it on? Your attention, please. Can you help us find this man? William Ferguson is a 32-year-old Caucasian, 6 feet 4 inches tall, brown hair, closely cropped beard. It is believed Dr. Ferguson has information crucial to a police investigation.
They can hear a cloud pass overhead. They can hear your heartbeat and the rhythm of your blood. They can track you by yesterday's shadow. They can see what you do before you do it. They can tear the scream from your throat. They can give pain beyond imagination. Wolfen. There is no defense.
I haven't seen this movie in so long, but again, like it's kind of hard not to talk about American Werewolf in London and The Howling when you're talking about this movie, especially in retrospect now. If I remember right, wasn't it Mayor Koch of New York? His kind of like reign in New York is the visual aesthetic. When I think of movies like The Warriors, that sort of aesthetic that Chud kind of leaned into, this idea of tenements and broken windows, Death Wish aesthetic, right? Where you need someone like Charles Bronson to go around with a bazooka because there's so much gang activity, let alone werewolf activity. And that was, I think, the interesting curveball for Wolfen, is that American Werewolf in London felt like it was closer to the Sherlock Holmes Victorian Gothic. They're from the Moors. And that's maybe like an ancient curse in the UK. Okay, cool. There's something romantic and also incredibly feral and deadly in the way werewolves are represented in American Werewolf. And then you get The Howling, where the werewolves are kind of like at a resort and they're kind of trying to lay low.
Yeah, kicking back.
And secret society, less like David Naughton being the victim versus Wolfen, where it's just like, all right, you got Albert Finney, he's a detective, certainly supernatural, but hey, let's throw you this curveball of Native Americans, feral predator thing, but in an urban setting. That's where I think they all have like their unique identity. The setting for this one being in New York, being in an urban area.
Yeah. And yeah, it's so interesting how these three, I don't know if you triangulate them, but yeah, like you said, like they all have their very unique perspectives. And so, the fact that all of these came out in 1981 is interesting because it makes you think like what was in the ether, but they all are very easily able to live in their own separate universes without really impeding on the other. I know there's a lot of talk of like, do you like The Howling versus American Werewolf in London more? A lot of that comes down to, I think sometimes just like the creature effects. Both of those have elements of comedy in them, whereas Wolfen is played really straight. But yeah, what you were talking about earlier with that, New York in the early 80s was just not a great place to visit. It had really suffered throughout the 70s and was still not in great shape by the early 80s. And that's depicted, it's a sobering effect in this movie. I mean, this was shot on location. The movie opens up with a scene in Battery Park. A lot of what you were talking about, kind of like that urban decay, takes place in the South Bronx, which, I mean, if you watch this movie and you look at this, I mean, there's a reason the Italians came in and filmed a bunch of post-apocalyptic films in and around New York at this time.
The Bronx Warriors and all those Mad Max exploitation type movies.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like a bombed out city. The societal angle is played up in this movie. You get like this interesting dynamic. And like I said, it starts out like with this murder of a prominent, well-to-do couple and their driver. There's a Native American element to this. There's a lot of sociological issues going on here that it kind of tackles. There's some kind of pseudoscience stuff as well with they're watching interviews with people and they're able to detect heat signals and to be able to tell if they're lying or not. And it doesn't really play up too much for the rest of the movie, but the fact that it's in there is another interesting wrinkle. And yeah, I mean, a really pretty incredible cast for what this movie is. Like you mentioned, Albert Finney, I think a multiple Academy Award winning actor. Gregory Hines is in this, doing some great work as well. Very familiar character actors are in this that you would recognize if you grew up or have consumed a lot of 80s movies. And Edward James Olmos is in this as well.
It's not wolves, it's Wolfen. For 20,000 years, Wilson. 10 times your fucking Christian era. The skins and the wolves, the great hunting nations lived together. Nature in balance. Then the slaughter came. The smartest ones, they went underground. Into the new wilderness, your cities. Into the great slum areas, the graveyard of your fucking species.
These great hunters became your scavengers. Your garbage, your abandoned people became their new meat animal.
Their own animals? Are you sure, Wilson? They might be gods.
In their eyes, you are the savage.
You got your technology, but you lost.
There's that Native American element, and he's had some trouble in the past. Albert Finney is kind of like brought back in. I don't know if he was retired or if he was like kicked off the force at one point, but they kind of bring him back in because of these murders that they want him to tackle. And he's had a past with Edward James Olmos where he wants to talk to him about what's happening. And the foreman, because Edward James Olmos is part of like this Native American group that's working on, I can't remember what bridge in the city, but Albert Finney literally walks up the cable to the top of this bridge. Like, this is not like, there's no special effects. This was not a set that they built. He's literally up there, and I'm watching him gingerly grab like railings. I'm like, oh yeah, that fear is real. Like, whatever he's doing here and whatever safety precautions they took in this scene, like, he's really up on the top of the cables of a bridge right now. And like, that is pretty wild.
For all the supernatural elements of this one, I do like what you were talking about, like the grittiness of it. Like, they gave the audience the framework of having someone like Finney be, like you said, he's either a retired police officer or he's been kind of kicked off the force. But the fact that they're kind of bringing him in here with Diane Verona, who's like the criminologist that he's working with, but there's still like a procedural framework. Here's a cop and a criminologist, and here's Gregory Hines with an amazing earring, and he's like the forensics doctor, mortician kind of person. Here's all this science and things that we can believe, and here's the framework of the police procedural. We understand what that's supposed to be like, so that way when we throw you a curveball and say, well, it could be werewolves, all right, we're going to have to already stretch the audience's imagination. Maybe we can suspend their disbelief.
And I don't want to spoil this. I mean, yes, it is a 40-something-year-old movie at this point, but it is kind of a creature feature. Like I said, it's definitely a werewolf-adjacent movie is probably the best way to describe it without revealing too much. Yeah, I mean, again, as we've said, like, very different from the other two werewolf movies of that year. So if you're going into it, it's definitely more of a slow burn. Like we said, like it's very much police procedural until you get to a certain point, but they start introducing some of those supernatural elements, and I think they do it in a really fun way where it's like, it again, like a lot of movies certainly back then would kind of introduce something. Someone could either be incredulous about it or be like, okay, well, that's interesting and weird shit's happening here, so until we know what's going on, let's just go with it. And that's kind of what Albert Finney does in this. Like, these bodies keep turning up that are like having their throats ripped out and they're completely like savage, and to the point where it's like, well, no human is doing this. And you know, and that's where Gregory Hines comes in because he's doing the forensics on it. And then they end up going to, I don't know, is the Bronx Zoo, or they go to, or the Central Park Zoo or something like that. And there's one of the scientists there, or, you know, animal studiers. That's the official term, animal studier. You know, they bring him in and he's like, oh, well, this is definitely, this hair that you found on the body is definitely from a wolf. And so like, no, okay, well now that's a element because there's no wolves in Manhattan. So what's going on here? So they roll out like these little pieces here and there to kind of draw you in. And then when it goes more full supernatural, you're kind of primed for it. But again, a lot of movies these days aren't made like this anymore. Like it takes its time. It introduces things slowly. There's definitely a creep factor to it. It's not overly bloody or gory, but there's some very effective scenes, especially when they're kind of in the South Bronx, like staking out like some of these dilapidated buildings that just have like random people kind of around there, but you know, like this is just really where the forgotten people of society are going to try and make a living, but there's also maybe another beastly presence there as well. And why is it there? Why is it preying on seemingly random people? All that gets answered, but we're not going to answer it here. You have to watch it for yourself. Wolfen, 81.